Do you have any good Julian stories of just being around this guy?
Yeah, he's one of the most competitive players I think I've ever been around in my life. We would bring players in all the time, bringing them into the cafeteria, and Jules is standing at this little bar making a shake, and the receiver happens to be white, and Jules starts screaming, "Not this year, not this year, not this year. You keep bringing these white receivers in, and they're not going to replace me. Not this year."
Welcome in. It is the Tuesday, May 27th edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov, and as we all know by now, it is a Tuesday, which means we have a special Spotlight guest of the week. Last week, we had Raiders GM John Spytek. This week, we are continuing in the executive route, and we will be joined by longtime NFL scout, Pro Scout Ronnie McGill, who spent close to a decade with the New England Patriots, won 3 Super Bowls during that dynasty run there in New England. Most recently was with the Houston Texans and their rebuild, where, of course, they got CJ Stroud and Will Anderson and the DeMeco Ryans hire, which was a big one. He has been around the NFL for a long time, has kind of seen a lot of things that goes on in the NFL. We talked about his career, his journey, those destinations he was with, what a pro scout even does, and much, much more. So here is my near 1 hour discussion with Ronnie McGill. Joining us today here on NFL Spotlight, he's a former running back at the University of North Carolina, who then went on to become a highly respected scout in the NFL, including nearly a decade with the New England Patriots, where he was a part of 3 Super Bowl winning teams. It is Ronnie McGill. Ronnie, thank you so much for joining us here today. How's everything going?
It's pretty good. Just hot in Houston. Outside of that, no complaints.
I love it. I mean, Houston, are we in triple digits right now or not yet?
We're always flirting with triple digits, except for in January and February. Right now, I think it's 96 outside, but it's really humid. That's the thing that always gets you. I know people talk about Phoenix being in the triple digits all the time. Yeah. Houston's 95 feels like literal death.
I do not want to be there right now. I'll just tell you that much. I mean, it was 70 degrees in New York like a week ago, and I don't like it. And now you're telling me about 96 and humid. No, thank you. But
I'll take that 70. I'll take that 70 any day of the week right now, so I can go outside and ride my bike.
Yeah, I mean, so come to New York, join us here. But I'm really happy to have you here on the show, and especially now in the off season where, I love getting executives and scouts and those type of people here on the show, especially guys who I think the average fans probably never knew who you guys are and what you guys do. And this is really what the show is about. It's the NFL Spotlight Show. It's recognizing people who deserve more recognition and just talking about people's careers and their journeys. And yours, I really enjoy everything about it because there aren't many people in the league who go from player to working in the front office. A lot of days, like if they do go in the football direction, it's usually media or it's coaching. You were in the scouting element. So let me just start with your career at UNC because you had a very productive college career, but that's where it ended. Let me just start with this. What ultimately led to your playing career coming to a close? Did you go to the combine? Was the NFL ever an option? How did that all unfold for you?
Injuries. I sustained quite a few of them. Never had anything that was major and career ending until my final game of my career. I got invited to All-Star games, got invited to the combine, and then my final game was against Duke. And I remember talking to my running back coach before the game, and he said he was going to limit my snaps. And I said, I don't need that. I'll be good. And then I tore my ACL, MCL, and meniscus. And it was a really tough rehab. And it just never got back to where it was beforehand. Prior to that, I did think that I had a shot at the NFL, and obviously going to the combine, most of the guys who go to the combine are going to get drafted. So that put it in my head that I was probably going to be able to play in the league, but the knee just never held up, never got back right.
It's very interesting perspective. And just going back to you and your career and just going through that significant knee injury and, of course, just never having that NFL opportunity, what was next for you when that was going on? Was coaching ever considered, or how did scouting appeal to you? How did that even come together? What was your career path after the NFL just didn't happen?
Well, still had a chance at the NFL. I went to the combine. I failed the physical. Went back for the recheck. Failed the physical. I talked to a couple of teams leading into the draft. They said that they would still take a chance on me with my knee. But I had to have an operation the following week, and that scared teams off. So then they just said they were going to hold off and see how my knee came along. Had a couple of invites for camps, but again, my knee just wasn't healthy enough. And I remember Nick Shirelli, he works with the Broncos. He called me and said, "Hey, we want to bring you in for rookie mini camp." And I remember saying like straight up to him, I was like, "Nick, I know you, so I'm not going to lie to you. You don't want to do that. Like, there's no way I'm going to make it through a practice, and I don't want you to stand on the table for me and then it not work." The way that I got into scouting and away from coaching was my junior year. I tore my pec in the summer, bench pressing way too much weight, something that I shouldn't have been doing. But being a leader of the team, the coaching staff wanted me to come back for training camp, and they wanted me to help out with the running backs. So I came back. They called me Coach McGill for 2 months, and it was absolutely miserable. It's not miserable in the fact that it's work, because I mean you're working on the scouting department as well, personnel. Like that's not a walk in the park, but coaching was just a little bit different. The hard part for me was getting players to do what you want them to do when sometimes there's no incentive for them to do it. You want somebody to cut a guy who's 270 pounds and he's 190 pounds. Like, that guy's going to see that as a loss most of the time. So he's going to find his way not to do it. That was the toughest part for me with coaching. And that's why I give those guys a lot of respect, because when I did it, you realize that you're talking to somebody with a mind who might not want to do what you want them to do, and you have to try to persuade them to do it. And that was really the thing with coaching that kind of led me a little bit away from there. I got back into it after I got back to South Carolina. I coached high school football for a couple of years, but I always had a passion for evaluations and seeing how the rosters get constructed.
How did you make that transition to scout and get your first opportunity, which ended up being with the Tennessee Titans as an intern? But how did that come together? Who were the people that really helped you put your foot in the door? Like, in this industry, whether it's a player or coach, executive, getting your foot in the door is all that matters. Like, who was that for you for it to actually end up happening?
Mine was really luck. I was kind of in the middle of everything. I was coaching high school football, and I had a friend who was moving from South Carolina to Arkansas for the Air Force, and he asked me to help him get there. I helped him get there. I'm in Arkansas. My knee is still giving me problems, and I fall one day, and I felt like I dislocated, but it popped back in place. So my plan was to go from Little Rock, Arkansas, back to Chapel Hill so I can see my trainer. During that trip, I stopped in Nashville, Tennessee, and I met with one of my closest friends. His name's Jack Richmond, has nothing to do with the NFL, but he said he was going out to dinner that night with a friend and asked if I wanted to go. I said, yeah, and go to the dinner. And the friend ended up being this guy, Trey Koziel, who is the co-director of player personnel for the Bears. We just started chopping it up. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I was coaching, but I kind of wanted to get into personnel. And then that just led to me staying in contact with him. And then they had interviews, and he helped me get in for an interview for a scouting intern position.
So you finally get that position with Tennessee. Your foot is in the door now, it's a big step. I mean, there are so many scouts right now who want to get into the NFL. It's not easy. You're in it now. Who were some of the people early on in your scouting career who kind of gave you that confidence boost? Someone who made you feel like I could really do this and move up the ranks?
There's a lot. Starting with Tennessee, the first person who really got me to start watching football was Blake Bedingfield. He was the director of college scouting when I was there, and we talked about players, but he told me to watch certain players. Don't just randomly watch players. If you're talking about a tight end, watch some tight ends. If you're going to talk about defensive linemen, watch these defensive linemen. And then on the other side, the personal side, a guy who I'm still I still really respect a lot. Lake Dawson, he kind of took me under his wing there early. I was always around him and Trey, and he just kind of taught me the ins and outs of the front office of the NFL. And then I got to New England, and there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of people who came from there, became GMs. J-Rob, John Robinson, was the first one to really show me how to watch film. Like, this is what you're looking for. Like, break it down this way, break it down that way. Watch a guy here, watch a guy there. Take these cut ups and really learn how to watch a guy. And then the next one was Dave Ziegler, who is probably the closest thing to a mentor to me in the NFL. He really took me and said, "Hey, you're doing a good job with the evaluations, and most people in the NFL can do a good job with the evaluation. But if you want to take it to the next step, then this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to start planning things, and this is how you need to start thinking about things."
Well, you mentioned that Dave Ziegler, of course, became a GM of the Raiders. J-Rob was a GM with the Tennessee Titans. Do you remember early on some of the guys who you scouted and you were like, oh, these are guys that I would bang the table for? Do you have any guys, early memories of those players when you learned how to watch film that you were like, oh, this guy is my guy?
Yes, I do. I got a list of them. The first one's Rex Burkhead. I started watching him early in my career when he was with Cincinnati. We would watch him every preseason. We would watch him around trade deadline. He didn't get a lot of burn because they had Jeremy Hill. So he was getting reps here, getting reps there, but not a ton. And for some reason, I just took a liking to him. Maybe because he was a 4-down player, and he stayed a 4-down player all the way through his entire career, being able to play offense, first and second down, carrying the ball, third down, and special teams. And I kept bringing that up. And eventually Dave was like, we'll eventually get Rex McGill here if you just keep trying. And then I've kind of helped facilitate some trades. I won't say that I carried them all the way over the line. So when I say the names that I'm going to say, don't treat it like I did the entire contract. I initially started some conversations with Andrew Berry about Josh Gordon. I had to bring his name up like 3 or 4 straight years when he was with the Browns. Like, hey, you want to move him? Hey, you want to move him? And he shot it down every year. And then finally, he was like, "What are y'all thinking?" And in New England is a little different than a lot of other places. Like, you had a lot of leeway, and Nick and Dave would basically be like, "All right, well, what do they want?" and see what they want. So you would start kind of working the trade, get some initial terms, and then you would hand it over to Nick. So I remember talking to Andrew, and he was like, "Oh, we want to." I think he said a third at the time or something like that. And New England's picks back then were treated kind of trashy because we were winning so much, so it was always at the back of the rounds. So I remember the initial talks of trying to figure out like how it was going to get to the middle ground, and then ended up working that one out. And then Akeem Ayers, I remember that one as well. He was with Tennessee, and I had a strong relationship with Tennessee because I obviously started my career there. And I was just looking through their depth chart and said that he wasn't playing, and the previous year he had 130 tackles or 100 tackles or something like that. And I brought his name up to Dave, and Dave was like, "Take it to Nick." I took it to Nick. Nick was like, "Reach out to him and see what they're thinking." So I sent Blake a text message and was like, "Hey, what's the deal with Akeem?" And then it started from there. And we ended up trading for him, and he had a really productive little season for us. Had a sack in the Super Bowl. So that one was another one that I remember initially not having the steam, and then it ended up picking up steam.
I want to go back to Josh Gordon specifically because I remember that one so well, because that was the year where I would say the receiver room in New England was missing like the big bodied guys. So like, what was like that entire process like, where you were asking Cleveland and Andrew Berry for years about it happening? Are you interested? Are you not? Kept on getting no's, finally getting a yes. Did it just feel like a perfect storm for the team and the organization to get that type of a player? And did you get a Tom Brady reaction out of that also?
It felt great because I think when you keep pushing for one specific person and you keep getting shot down, it can become demoralizing. But to me, I was just like, eventually they keep saying it in the media that he's going to get traded here. That I'll just wear you down, and eventually, like, we'll be able to get it done. So yeah, it did feel good, and and the story about Tom is I there's not very many players I've ever been like awestruck about. I have my initial Tom Brady sighting it was one for the ages, but I'll get to the receiver thing. So one time I remember I was in a weight room, me and Steve Cargill, who's he's the assistant director of pro personnel with the Texans now. He was we were in the weight room and we were on the treadmill, and Tom walked in, and he just he's a to me, he was a normal or more normal than I thought he was going to be. I don't know what I was really expecting initially, but he cares so much about what he does. So I think naturally he's going to care about what other people around him are doing because it's going to affect him. So he would sometimes ask about some of the guys. And I remember one time we were on the treadmill at that time, and he asked us what we were watching. And he asked us if we can get him a big receiver. It's like, we can try. We'll see how it goes. So it ended up happening, and we ended up getting Josh Gordon. And I remember the first touchdown for Josh Gordon. Tom was like scrambling around. He has the ball in his hand. He does this, and then he just chunks it down the field. And I was like, please let that be Josh. And he went up between two guys and caught a touchdown. I was like, man, this is like a dream come true.
I just love hearing that story because I remember like Josh Gordon of 2012 and just how insane that year was. Just I'm curious to hear from you from a scout mindset. How would prime Josh Gordon, fare in today's NFL, especially with all the off the field stuff that he had issues with actually being allowed now?
Yeah, I talked to somebody about that, and it's very unfortunate for him that where the league was when he was in it, and everything that transpired. Being around him and being in a building with him, he's not some people might think he's a knucklehead. I don't think he's a knucklehead. I just think he had a hard time with the things that he had in his life. As far as being on the field, there's no way that the guy wouldn't be a top 3 receiver in the league. He's big, he's strong, and he's fast. That's what every receiving coach wants for their receiver group. But then you add on a guy who's big, fast, and strong, and can also run routes. He can attack the ball. He can stretch the field. The biggest thing with him is being able to catch and then run after the catch. You get some big receivers that can do it a little bit. DeAndre Hopkins was really good at it in his prime. Josh Gordon was that plus faster, and I will say he was literally one of the most impressive players I think I've ever seen. Not in uniform, like when he walked on the field with his shirt out the first time, I was like, that's what a football player is supposed to look like.
It's unbelievable, and it's unfortunate that he never got the chance to just have a full real career because what he did that one year in Cleveland, which was I think he only played 14 games and still led the league in receiving yards. It was something very, very special. But circling back here just to you and your career there in New England, this is really the crux of where your career was outstanding and you were a pro scout there. But I don't think people know a lot of the stuff you do on a day-to-day when you're in the building as a pro scout. And one of the things that I think if you ask an average fan, what is an advanced scout, they would have no idea. That was a very, very big job of yours. I guess just explain, first of all, what is an advanced scout and what does your week look like in New England doing that?
The advanced scout is the scout that gets the team ready in advance for the opponent. So say this is a Sunday where we're going to play the New York Giants, but the following week we're going to play Cincinnati Bengals. The advanced scout for the Cincinnati Bengals is working a week ahead of where we are. So once we get to game week, the team's already ready, and you've given everything to the coaching staff, and basically everybody is prepared. So you're just getting everybody ready in advance for when that game comes up. It's a little different for every team, every organization. I mean, it was different when I first got to New England versus where it was when I finished. When I first got to New England, it was probably a 7 or 8 day process. When I left New England, it was closer to a 10, 11, 12 day process. You initially start breaking down the depth chart, and the difference between New England and other places, and I'm not going to say New England, I'm going to say New England with Bill Belichick, because you've never met anybody who is more detailed oriented than that guy. And no small thing is unimportant. Like every single thing that a team does is important. So the first thing we would start doing is going over the depth charts, and really what you were trying to do is make sure that they knew which players were going to come on the field at any given time. So in this situation, if they go nickel on 3rd and 6, most of the time they're going to be big nickel. So safety's going to come in at nickel instead of bringing in one of their little small cornerbacks. If it's 3rd and long, then they're going to go dime. They got 3 dime packages. Baltimore was really big on this, having a package for every single offense that you can put out there. So we just tried to break down all those packages, make sure that they knew which players were going to come on at which time. And then we also we had advanced reports. We had one that went to the coaches and one that went to the players. The one to the players was more role specific. So let's see, Tank Dell is the small inside receiver. Use them on go routes. Rex Burkhead is their 4-down back. He comes in and he's a backup. He spills a running back on 1st and 2nd down. He's a starter on 3rd down, and then he plays on special teams. So you're basically telling the players what their role is at the game, how they're utilized at the game. And then for the coaches, it was more skill oriented. Like, this guy's quick, fast, blah, blah, blah. And they like to do this with the player in these situations. You do that, and then, you do it for the entire team. You break down the coaching staff, where the coaches came from, how that influences the way that they play, their previous 4 games or 5 games or whatever, how they have been playing leading up into your game. And then you present it all to the coaching staff the Monday or sometimes Tuesday of the week in which you're going to play them. So Monday in New England, we would meet with the offensive staff at 9, the defensive staff at 9:30, and you go over everything with the coaching staff. You basically break down their roster, break down their tendencies from a personnel standpoint, not from an analytical standpoint, from a personnel standpoint. And then it's like question and answers, and you get ready for any random question that Bill Belichick is going to throw at you.
I'm gonna get the Bill for a second, but essentially you and your people who also do this are preparing the rest of the team and the coaches and the players about the teams that are coming up over here on the schedule, of course, that week, but you start before that. Now, you mentioned meeting with the offensive staff, the defensive staff. I'll get to the Bill in a second, but some of the people that you worked with were Josh McDaniels and Brian Flores when they were there. That was OC and DC. And they actually started as scouting assistants, so they kind of knew your world a little bit. What was it like working with those 2 guys? And were you able to tell while you were there that these 2 guys would eventually become head coaches in the NFL?
Yes, I knew. I'll start with that. Yes, I knew both of them would become head coaches. They're completely different people, completely different personalities, but the thing that you learn in New England is the process, and the way that they handled their processes was great. When B-Flow was running the defense, it was amazing. And when Josh was running the offense, it was amazing. So you really see how they operate and how they're able to take their side of the ball and lead it. And you can kind of you can project that into a bigger role or a leadership role. Now, both of them became head coaches, and it didn't go the way that either one of them probably would have wished it went. But I don't think that takes away from them being able to present it and put it in front of everybody the way that they were supposed to. And I'll say there's a lot of guys that take dings from that New England tree, but guys not hiring themselves. There's somebody in front of them that they're impressing. So, both guys are really impressive. And as far as the scouting background, no lie, some coaches take that advance and they throw it in the trash. They would just like toss it. Those 2 guys did not toss it. Josh was very and still very particular on depth charts, extremely picky. Sometimes you would have to work with the quality control coach or a position coach on the depth charts. and those things better match up. They're better not. He like one time we went in there and he's like, "Well, Ronnie has him as this, and you have him as that. Like, what's the deal?" Those two guys, because they were both scouting assistants, they know to work with the scouting assistants. I don't think every coach that comes into the league is on that same mindset. Not everybody really wants to work with the scouts that's doing the depth charts. Sometimes I think it's in their mind, well, I'm the coach, this is what I see, so this is what I'm going to put down. But for us, we're watching more film than most guys in the building of any particular team on any week. So I think they understood the value of that and just how much that can play in the role of trying to win a game on Sunday, which is essentially what you're trying to do.
Ask this, but I remember there was a year where the Patriots actually did a behind the scenes video of what an advanced scout does. And part of it also is going to those teams' games before, of course, you play them in a few weeks. Was that something you also had to do where you had to travel to other teams' games to go check them out?
Yes. People always ask me if I go to games, and I always tell them, like, yeah, I'm here this week, here that week. When you have a 2 or 3 man rotation in advances, you're normally out every other week. And you see your team play every once in a while, but most of the time you're on the road going to a different game. You get credentialed from that team. So if I'm going to watch Carolina at Chicago, we have to get in touch with Chicago, say, hey, we want to get a credential. They give us a credential because in the NFL, you want to, if I'm going to give you something, I want to make sure I get something in return. So you try to be cool and cordial with the other teams and making sure that you're allotting them what they want. So you travel by yourself. It's not as glamorous as people probably think it is, and you're taking a private jet or you're on a team plane. You're sitting in coach or you're sitting in first class. I never got first class. I was always a coach guy. I'm just a regular old guy. So you sitting coach, and hopefully you can do your work without anybody bugging you because they see what you're doing. You go to the game, you get there Saturday, spend Saturday by yourself, getting ready for the game. You have a bunch of notes. Then you go to the game on Sunday, and then you're out of there, like right after the game.
Well, you mentioned before how Bill Belichick was the most detail-oriented person you know. Do you have any examples of what that means? Like, did you see any of those behind-the-scenes moments with Belichick that made you say, all right, this guy is just at a completely different level?
Yeah, the first time he caught me off guard. I went in for an advance, and we were talking. It was Kansas City. We were talking about the tight ends, and we go to Kelsey. Obviously, I'm like, he's a starter, and I bring up Blake Bell. He like sits back for a second. He's like, is this the guy who committed as a quarterback and then switched positions to tight end after he didn't become the starter? And at first I was like, hey, you got me on that one. I'm not sure, but with Bill, you never lie to him because most of the time he knows everything that's going on around. If he asks you a question, then he might have a inkling of what the answer might be. So I told him I'm not 100% sure, but I can go back and look at it. And then that created that didn't create a monster, but we did a lot of stuff that I know other teams didn't do. We looked at almost everybody pregame throwing the ball, which hand they throw it, how good of throwers they are. We looked at when. We watched quarterbacks' balls, when they throw them, how the wind affected them, which direction they played best in. We talked about communication. We talked about hand signals. We talked about everything. I really don't think that there's a single thing that goes on Sunday that he's not aware of. And if he's not aware of it, then most of the times it ended up spawning something. Like Dave Ziegler had a small project for him that talked about we were going to the Super Bowl. We were playing Atlanta. Dave went over where Atlanta was, how they wanted to play that season, and then where they ended up at the end of that season. And it was, I think Dave did a 1-page summary on the entire team. And then Bill came back and he wanted to do an entire thing on the entire team. So it turned into this whole 2 or 3 page process. breaking down every single player on the team, contracts, and all that good stuff. So it was just, you give them something and then you wanted more detail off of it, which, I mean, if that's the first place that you work at, and then it's hard to accept anything less from coaches. So that's the really good thing.
I mean, I remember this one story Julian Edelman said that he would have his players wear the same color gloves as the other team's jersey so they can't tell your whole it's like that's next level thinking that they had there in New England. And it's crazy to hear all these like how a ball is moved. Like that's like who watches that? I don't do you have you heard from other buildings or people in the NFL community that do that?
No, I haven't. And I talking to people from around the league, I haven't talked to anybody who was as in detailed as we were when we were rolling with all of that. And I've also worked for 4 other coaches, and I know talking to those coaches that it's not the same. And I'm not knocking them for the way that they do things. He's just different. And I think people who are in the film, if I say a beautiful mind in the way John Nash walked around and he always had numbers going around in his head, and he was always thinking about math equations. When I was in the building, I looked at Bill like that's kind of what I thought. It's like, oh, he's over there scheming up something right now. He's thinking of a way to break something else now.
Yeah, it's truly incredible, and you were there obviously for nearly a decade to see all of this. I didn't mention just being a pro scout, the free agency element in New England as well. You guys were never in the flashy business when it came to signing free agents, but there was that one year when you guys did make this crazy signing, which I remember covering that free agency. It came out of nowhere. Could you take me back to just signing Stephon Gilmore to, I think it was the highest paid cornerback in football at the time, which again was not a New England thing. What was the lead up to that of seeing this player and putting him on the free agent board and being like, you know what, we're going to go aggressively on this guy?
Again, the thing about New England and the thing about working for Bill is just because we might not sign a player doesn't mean we're not going to watch that player. We watch everybody. We go over almost everybody. But when it got time to signing and we get closer to the end of the process, there's a line of demarcation, and we're like, those names up there, we ain't touching those. Those are probably gonna be too expensive for us. But we get to that free agency and we have our board set. So like we have all of the guys. And what we would normally do was we would pull guys into pockets. Like say we wanted a 4th corner. Instead of all of the 4th corners, the ones that we were interested in, we would pull those guys to the side and then we would start stacking them together. And this was all a Dave thing. He got us to start doing that and watching them in little groups. So we went through cornerbacks, and I think that was the market that we initially thought we were in. We thought we were in a 3rd to maybe a 2nd corner. And then we were talking to Bill, and he came in and it was like, what do you guys think of Stephon? It was like, Stephon who? It was like Gilmore. So we were like, okay, well, now we gotta really watch him. So we put him in the stack. We watched him. I think it was almost unanimous decision of he's the best up there. Now, obviously, he didn't have the greatest season prior to that, but Bill liked the way that he played certain schemes or certain techniques. And what we learned in New England is you don't knock the player for what they can't do. You grade the player for what they can do. So then we had to look at him in that light. And once we compared him to the other corners that we had in that light, it was like, that's a no-brainer. So I think it shocked everybody, but in the building, we already knew he was on the board. Like we knew he was at the top of the board, and we were just waiting for free agency to hit. And it's like, are we going to be able to get him? And then it came through. And it's not very many times that you get cheers in free agency in New England, but when that came across ESPN, you can hear a bunch of people go, yes.
I remember it like yesterday because it was a free agent cornerback class that had some names. AJ Bouye was the other cornerback who was pretty big, but everybody, and I mean everybody, was linking Stephon to Chicago that year and ends up in New England. The other thing I wanted to ask you about it is just the element of nobody knowing anything about what goes on in New England, like the secrecy of all of it, like how was that in the building and everybody knowing like, hey, we're not letting anything leak to the public? Because I don't think there was ever a team in the NFL that did a better job than the Patriots at that.
Yeah, it's you're not getting beat over the head to do it. It just starts coming naturally. It's really easy to not tell somebody something, or it's really easy to tell somebody if you got a question or if you want to answer to that, then you need to go to the person who has the answer to it. And if that person is saying no, then it makes it easier for me to say no or just avoid the question whenever it's asked. I don't think there's really any secret sauce to it. Just everybody knows that you come in, you do your job. If it's something that pertains to you, then you can speak on it. But if it's not something that doesn't pertain to you, then you don't speak on it. And I think Bill used to do that with injuries. You know, wide receiver gets asked about a running back's injury. Well, he's not the running back, and he's not the coach, and he's not the medical staff. So why is he even answering that question? So it makes it easy. I scout, I do in personnel. Don't ask me what plays we're gonna be running on Sunday because that ain't a part of my job. So
Yeah.
that whole do your job thing, I think it kind of helps lead into the secrecy, if you want to call it that, in New England. But I mean, it's no secret to it. I just think everybody was just going about their business and not worried about what was going on outside.
I just think it's really cool that everyone is pulling in the same direction. I mean, you see teams in the NFL right now where there's just leak bonanza of stuff going on, of what's going on inside the building. And we never had that in New England during that very, very special era. You know, inside of an organization and a team, and especially a team that is really successful and winning Super Bowls, everyone loves talking about the big names and rightfully so, Tom and Gronk and whatever. But who are some of the players, maybe not the stars, who you just loved having in the building, guys that meant a lot culturally? And I feel like New England had a lot of those guys who maybe didn't get that much recognition of what they did over there.
Well, the first one, he is a star and he should be a Hall of Famer at some point. I don't know if he'll make it in or not, but Matt Slater, I feel like he was the heartbeat and the soul of New England. Like he was the epitome of what you wanted as a player. Not a lot of, well, he did talk on the field, which some people don't know, but not a lot of talk. Extremely positive, extremely humble, very nice, always there working. Seemed like he had some kind of hip surgery every single year, but he was literally in the weight room every single day when you go in there. Just an awesome person. He sometimes positions and players and different organizations can get very cliquey. So these players hang with these players. He hung with everybody. He was with the offensive linemen. He was with the receivers. He was with the running backs. He talked to everybody that was in the building. He asked questions. He was inquisitive. So he's a guy that I think that anybody who had anything to do with New England would put him at the top of just people. Obviously, I spoke on Rex. Rex was down in Houston when I was there. Great guy, awesome. I can say almost the same thing. When he came in, adapted to what we were doing in New England, and then he tried to take it to Houston. Another guy who I really enjoy was Brendan Bolden. My sister loved him. She would have married him if he would have gave her the opportunity. She kept asking me to get pictures with him. It's cool when New England came down. I saw a couple of guys. I saw Hoyer, saw Slater, saw Bolden, and me and Bolden got a picture together after the game in the locker room, which is not the locker room, but in the tunnel, which is cool because I was a scout, and then I was a director in Houston, but I was never a GM, so I wasn't one of the big names. But for Hoyer to come over to me on the sideline and Bolden to take a picture with me, and I saw Devin McCourty, saw Jason McCourty, and both of them was like, "What's up?" To see that, I don't know if that's just New England. That's just the way that the guys were that were there, or if that's just them. But that was a cool thing about my NFL time is it seems like those guys who no reason whatsoever to be on a first name basis with everybody or was on a first name basis with everybody.
I think it also means a lot about what you meant inside the building and your relationships with all those people, whether it's coaches, executives, and players, that they still, know you, respect you, will come over to you wherever you are. It says a lot about you as well. And it's pretty cool you mentioned Slater, just because I've heard Belichick say that I've had the honor of coaching the greatest offensive player ever in Brady, greatest defensive player in Lawrence Taylor. And then he mentions the greatest special teams player ever. And he says Matthew Slater. And I think a lot of fans are like, wait, what? And it's like, no, that's really who he was on the field and also off the field. Doesn't really get talked about it much. And I think him being a potential Hall of Famer, it sounds kind of crazy, but I think Bill would actually advocate for that to eventually happen, which I don't think fans realize just how important he was for that dynasty throughout his career there.
Yeah, and it wasn't really just on the field. I mean, it was the locker room as well. Um, there is a saying that you can't lie to the locker room, which basically means that you can put a player on a pedestal if you want to. You can sign a free agent to $100 million, but if he comes in that locker room and that locker room has a foundation and they know what they're rooted in, and that player doesn't fit, then it's not going to work. Like regardless of how talented you think that player is. In New England, I really think that's true. You can't lie to players, and I felt like if you weren't on great terms with Slater, then you probably that it's you. There's no way it's him. It's you. It's got to be you.
It's so true, and I think I've never heard a single person say something negative about Matthew. So he meant a lot there in New England. There was one more player I did want to ask you about from that Patriots era, and I just felt like he's a very unique person, a very fun character, and I think he kind of lightens up the mood whichever room you're in, and that is Julian Edelman. Do you have any good Julian stories of just being around this guy who came in as a seventh round pick as a quarterback and became this great receiver?
Yeah. First, I'll start off by saying people think he just became Julian Edelman, but that's not what happened at all. When I first got there, Wes was still there, and you could watch Wes run a route, and if you look behind the play, you would see Jules kind of shadow running that same route, same moves, working the top of his routes, and then he worked his butt off. I don't think there's very many players I've seen that I can really say truly got faster when they got to the NFL. And I feel like his first year, I thought like, okay, he has solid speed, but then as the years went along, I was like, he actually has pretty good speed because he's running away from some people who have speed. Um, so a great work ethic. He's one of the most competitive players I think I've ever been around in my life. Him, Tom, Logan Mankins, I put those guys up there, but the personality is completely is completely different than what I think the normal New England player was. And a funny story is I think him and Slater were roommates. I'm not 100% positive about that, but I think they were, and you couldn't get two completely different people to live in the same house. But a funny story was Jules being competitive, always having a chip on his shoulder. We would bring players in all the time, and I remember one time we signed a receiver, and we were bringing a receiver into the building. And normally we tried to avoid the cafeteria because that's where all the players were. Never went through the locker room because you don't want to upset the locker room. So bringing them into the cafeteria, thinking nobody's going to be in there. Walk in, and Jules is standing at this little bar making a shake, and the receiver happens to be white, and Jules starts screaming really loud, "Not this year, not this year, not this year." And get over to Jules, and I'm like, "Bro, what are you talking about? Not this year?" And he said, "You keep bringing these white receivers in, and they're not going to replace me. Not this year, not this year, not this year." And I was like, "You got that's a hard welcome for that guy over there." He's just
That is
yeah, he was one of a kind, man. He's still one of a kind. Absolutely loved seeing him. Loved having him on the team. I would say everybody loved having him on the team. That energy, that same attitude, he carried everywhere. That same competitiveness, he carried everywhere. He played every practice just like he played a game. He treated every workout just like it was a game. So if you brought somebody in who he thought was competition, he was going to let you know that's not competition. And I really appreciate that, and I really respected it. And you had to earn this respect. And I'll tell you, somebody else who had to earn this respect was Stephon. They got into it one time. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but they did get into it because Jules was a little chippy.
Public, I think it's public somewhere.
Okay, all right, yeah. Well, they got into it because was being really chippy. And Stephon is, when I say even keel, I mean he might be the most even keel person that you will ever meet. Not just football player, but just even keel. He's just like, "What's up? What's up?" Like that's kind of how he goes around. You know, Jules is going around 100 miles per hour. So Stephon kind of practices the same way. He just, it's hard to get him up. He's really good at practice, but you can't get him to say anything. And I think Jules and Amendola was trying to get him to say something, and he wouldn't say anything. And then finally Jules finally got him to snap, and they got into it, and they got kicked off the field. So yeah, I think Jules for being able to get Stephon riled up and kicked off the field.
It's actually impressive because we had Zaire Franklin, the Colts linebacker, on the show, and he was on here, and he was like, some guys on my teams don't talk. I have to talk for them. And he had Stephon on the team. And he's like, whenever Stephon would make a pass breakup, I would go there and like talk to the receiver in place of Stephon. So it's quite impressive that Julian was able to do that. But let's move off of the Patriots here and just talk a little bit about your time in Houston, which is where you ended up going when Nick Caserio got hired there. Just making that move to Houston, what was the biggest adjustment stepping into a completely different organization after being with New England for close to 10 years?
The biggest thing I think is just culture. New England's culture was, like I said earlier, it's rooted, it's stable. You know what you're getting from every single player. Bill set the precedent, and then the players really set the precedent for the players. So at some point, Bill doesn't even have to really go into the locker room to talk. You got to win over Slater. You got to win over Hightower. You got to win over Big V. You got to win over Mayo. So and before that it was Nico. It was like it was always the players that you had to win over. And once I got to Houston, I found, and I don't want to knock Houston or for what they had, but it was just different. It seemed like in New England, or not seem like it, in New England, the objective every year was to win a Super Bowl. Whatever it takes to win a Super Bowl. Players don't care, the coaches don't care, the scouts don't care. The year leading up into it might suck, but getting to the end, everybody wanted to win the Super Bowl. And I didn't necessarily feel that with Houston. And I just, you can feel a place where you think that it needs a culture change, and that was really it. I'll say the owners, Kyle and Hannah, great, and they want that team to be great. And I think they invested to make sure that it could feel like a winning organization.
Yeah, I mean, it had to be different going to Houston and all that success in New England to that situation in Houston. If people don't remember, I mean, there were back-to-back head coaches who were fired. I mean, It was in and out. But you were there when they hired DeMeco Ryans, and you were part of that help to find him as the next head coach. Just hiring him as the guy, what stood out about him in that interview process? And of course, ever since he got there, along with CJ in that draft, which we'll get to here in a second, that's when things really started to change a little bit there.
Yeah, I think DeMeco, the person when you go into his office versus the guy that you see on the field, is two different people. He's about as genuine as a person as you're going to find in the NFL. And I'll say this for all of the people who want to work in the NFL who don't know what it's like behind the doors. There's not a ton of genuine people. There are genuine people in the league, but there's a lot of people out for themselves. There's people who just want pats on the back. There's people who will portray themselves as one thing, and then they're actually something else behind closed doors. So whatever you see in the media, whatever they're putting on social media is one thing. What you get is a different thing. DeMeco is the same person all the time. He's a very genuine, caring guy. He has a great personality when he's on the field. It's energetic. You could feel it when he got to Houston. Like, you can feel in his interview, even though he's a laid back guy, you can feel the energy that he's going to bring to the organization and to the team. And I remember at the end of the interview, we had questions and answers. And my question was, previous to this, it was made to the media or it was told to the media that you weren't going to take an interview with the Houston Texans. It was like, that was 2 weeks ago. What's changed since then? And his answer was basically, that didn't come from me. You can read whatever you want to read about that, but I'm not from here, but I'm from here. My wife is rooted here. We have a foundation here. We have a home here. I was drafted here. I was a captain here. Like, this means more to me than what it's going to mean to the normal person. And if I am able to get this head coaching job, it's not just DeMeco Ryans, the head coach. It's DeMeco, who is also the face of the Houston Texans organization. So basically putting the organization on his back and not just saying it was just about him. He said it was about the team and it was about the city. And that was once he said it, I almost stood up and started clapping. It's like, all right, well, that's the new head coach right there.
That is an amazing story. It's an incredible story. And obviously he's had 2 years there, 2 years of making the playoffs. And I just think about him in particular for a second. Like, he had a chance, I remember, to maybe even get hired in Minnesota the year before. And he took his name out because he was like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. And then, of course, comes down to, I think it was Houston and Denver. And you can make an argument Denver was in a better situation, but he wanted to come to Houston. I think that said a lot about him. And like you said, in that interview process, hearing him out and hearing how much he wanted to get that Texans job. Now, that year as well was very big for the organization because of that draft, which was taking CJ at 2 and Will Anderson at 3. Just curious to hear from you, like, what was the process like internally landing those two guys at those two spots when, speaking about secrecy again, I don't think anybody knew that you guys were going to be picking at 2 and 3.
I'll be lying if I said I knew that was going to happen. You could tell from being in the building. I think I talked to DeMeco the day before, 2 days before the draft. He was really high on Stroud, really, really high on Stroud. He loved him, loved the personality. So I could get a sense that he wanted him. And then we brought Will Anderson in for a pre-draft visit. And I'm not lying when I say it's probably one of the best 3 pre-draft visits I've ever seen or been a part of in my entire career. It was, he gave a passionate speech at the end. I think my question to him was, there's been other defensive ends that's gotten drafted in the last 2 years. Like, what makes you different from them? And it was all about his heart and, him having a heart that other guys don't have, and him just always laying his heart on the line during the game. And it was so passionate that when he got up, I think everybody was like, man, I really hope we draft that guy. So then we get into the draft room, and this is where I think people think that there was, like, the deal was already done, but we got in there and we take CJ, and I was like, oh yeah, well, now we got a quarterback. And then Nick was on the phone with Monty trying to work the deal to get back up to get Will. I didn't initially think it was going to happen because I don't know if it seemed like it was far apart, but I think it was like a couple of calls. And then Monty was like, yeah, we'll do it. And when that happened, you could see DeMeco being all excited because now he got his quarterback and his defensive end. So it was a wild room, to say the least.
It's crazy. I think that detail isn't known that much, that those big deals, especially draft day trades, usually, like, sometimes they're done before the draft even starts, and it's more of, as long as my guy's on the board, we'll do this. That trade, I mean, you've told me this privately now, of course, here as well, was actually done on the clock and getting the details ironed out of which picks were going where. It was not even finalized until Arizona got on the clock. That is a crazy detail. So, and of course, later that season, of course, CJ wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. Will wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. And look at Houston now, at least from a comparative standpoint, in a much, much better place. Looking ahead for you.
Can I say something on that real quick? been
Yeah,
in
yeah.
draft rooms, and also, you know, being a director of pro, working with Bill, who would trade anything for at any time. You got to give Nick and you got to give Monty credit for getting it done. You see a lot of times where people say they want to trade and they want to get a trade done, but I don't think they necessarily want it. They want the perception that they're trying to get a trade done. And I've always said, if you want to get a deal done, you'll get it done. And I think just watching that and listening to it, that was one of those situations where I think both people wanted to get it done. And instead of, you know, pointing fingers and saying, oh, well, that's the reason why it didn't work, or this is the reason why it didn't work, he wanted this pick. It's like, we want our guy, you want your picks, let's just make it happen.
Yeah, and it got done. And there's a very famous video out there of Monty working the phones and getting it done on the clock as well. And now we know the actual details of the call was actually ongoing for a number of minutes to figure out which picks were going where. Arizona moved down to, I think, 12, then came back up to 6. They got Paris Johnson. Detroit went down to get Jahmyr Gibbs. A lot of moving parts there with that draft. But it's a great story and a really great detail into all of this. I did want to ask you, just looking ahead a little bit, about you and your career. I know this past year you were working with the Reese's Senior Bowl and Jim Nagy, who did a great job leading everything, is now the GM at Oklahoma. You've had a very unique path in football. Like, what do you want next to be for you? Any long-term goals you're thinking about? I know there's, the NIL world and the college world is changing. The NFL world is changing. Like, what are you looking at right now for you?
Well, I'm still relatively young at 40, also relatively old in NFL
That's a
terms.
young age. It's young.
There's a lot of avenues. There's NFL. There's also, as you said, there's also colleges. And once the settlement gets done, I think teams or colleges are going to be more apt to do something with people in the front office. And we've seen some big names in the NFL go to the college. You never thought you'd see Bill there. One of my close friends, Patrick Stewart, is the GM with Nebraska. It's more attractive than what it used to be. And it's not just NFL. Now it's not just that's the place where I'm going to go and be able to evaluate this talent. So for me right now, it's really just sitting back. I had some opportunities. I'll have some more opportunities come my way. I got some things in the mix, and it's really just waiting and seeing what really works for me. I've had multiple people tell me, well, why are you taking this time off? You should do media because you got a smile and a personality. So, I'm just waiting to see what works best for me and my family.
It makes a lot of sense. And I know a lot of other people who are in NFL front offices right now who are also just thinking about, hey, what's going on there in college? So taking a second to look at the entire landscape is not a bad idea, I would say. You did mention just Bill a second ago, and you were a running back at UNC. I'm just curious for your thoughts of Bill being the head coach at UNC, and how do you think that's going to shake out? Bias or not, whatever it is, you could say it.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm always biased. I was biased before he was even there. I said we're gonna win the national championship. Now I really think you put him in a situation where players are going to listen to him, and I think you not automatically, but there was always a saying when I was going on advances, you got Bill as a coach, that's going to get you 8 wins. You got Tom as a quarterback, that's going to get you 8 wins. You put them together, you're probably looking at 12. I think as long as he figures out this quarterback situation, he should have a chance at making a run for the ACC championship. There's no way that anybody can really argue him not being one of the greatest coaches of all time. I'll say he is the greatest coach of all time. When you have the greatest coach of all time and you give him resources, most of the time that team's gonna have a shot at whichever title they're looking at the end of the season. So I think realistically, shooting low 8, but it's the ACC, so we could go just run the table on them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see it.
I absolutely trust Bill. I would trust Bill. I got a 7-week-old son. I would trust Bill if my son was 9 weeks and that was a 9-week-old team. I trust him to get that team to win 11 games, and him also teach him how to read a defense and offense.
That is fantastic. I'm excited to see it. I mean, nobody thought it would happen. It happened, and now here we are. And the season will be here soon enough. All right, Ronnie. This is the NFL Spotlight Show. We never let our guests leave without asking this one question. You could pick a coach, an executive, a player, anybody you want, somebody involved with football. Who do you think should be in this seat here in the future?
I don't think he's been on here. Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson has not been on here.
Okay, all right. Well, me and Ben, we go way back. We played at UNC together. I kind of roomed with him, not by choice. I just moved into his room one time, so we've been really close. I was in his wedding. I will say, I mentioned him and I said it. That's who I think should be on here. Getting him on here and getting in touch with him. Good luck with that one.
I do love the fact that you mentioned Ben. I mean, his story is a really cool one. I mean, people don't realize this. I know everyone connects him to Dan Campbell, but he was actually hired by Matt Patricia, which is a very interesting detail there in Detroit. Dan kept him on staff. I know they were together in Miami as well, but that's a fun little detail about him and his rise up the ranks, what he did in Detroit and now taking over in Chicago. Really excited to see him. And if we need that contact, maybe we'll just use you, Ronnie, to make that happen.
All right, I'll talk to his wife and see if I can persuade her to persuade him to come on.
I love it. Well, Ronnie, I want to thank you for coming on here on the show for nearly an hour, talking about your entire career, the journey, all the stories. I mean, it was great to have you on here and just hear about everything. And I'm wishing you lots of luck and success in everything you end up doing, wherever that takes you. And we will be following along very closely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate y'all having me on.
Special thanks to Ronnie McGill for joining us here on the show this week, being our special spotlight guest of the week. A really cool story because we don't really see many of those guys who go from, player to going into the scouting community. And Ronnie did that, and he was a part of a very special run in New England, those last 3 Super Bowls with Tom Brady. And he was a part of a very loaded front office, a bunch of guys who became GM over there, from a John Robinson to Dave Ziegler to Bob Quinn to Nick Caserio and many more. So he has been around a lot of really, really great people. And of course, Bill Belichick himself. So a lot of really great information. And we are going to continue to try to get more executives here on the show on NFL Spotlight, whether it's a player, coach, executive, whoever it is. But executives at this time of year, it's probably a smart way to go, especially because I do think you guys, the fans, the listeners, you guys love hearing from them. But like we said last week, if you have anyone you want us to get here on the show, whether it's a player, a coach, executive, somebody behind the scenes, somebody who deserves more recognition, leave it in the comment section. Let me know on Twitter or X at My Sports Update, DM Ben at Ben Allen Sports as well. Let us know, and we are going to get to work on trying to get them here on the show if they deserve to be on it. But that would do it here for our Tuesday, May 27th edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. We will be back here tomorrow talking more about the NFL, everything going on around the league, the ripple effects, and much more. We will see you all tomorrow morning.